The rain was coming down hard that Tuesday evening, the kind of rain that soaks you to the bone in seconds. Lisa hurried through the doors of Rosie's Corner Cafe, shaking water from her hair as she tied her apron. She was already 10 minutes late for her shift, and her manager, Mr. Peterson, didn't tolerate tardiness. The bus had been delayed again, but excuses didn't pay the bills. The cafe was unusually quiet for a Tuesday. Just a few regulars sat scattered around the worn vinyl booths, nursing their coffee and picking at pie. Lisa liked it better this way. Fewer customers meant fewer orders to juggle, and her feet were already aching from the morning shift she'd pulled at the diner across town. 2 jobs, 7 days a week. That was her life now, and had been for the past 8 months since her mother's diagnosis. She grabbed the coffee pot and made her rounds, forcing a smile she didn't quite feel. Mrs. Chen wanted her usual refill. Old Mr. Davis needed more cream. The teenage couple in the corner booth were too wrapped up in each other to notice she'd even approached. Lisa's mind drifted as she worked, mentally calculating numbers that never seemed to add up. The hospital bill was due Friday. She had maybe $60 in her account. The medicine alone cost $80, and that wasn't counting food, bus fare, or the electricity bill that was already 2 weeks overdue. The bell above the door chimed, pulling her from her thoughts. A man stumbled in from the rain, and Lisa felt her heart sink a little. He was clearly homeless. His clothes were several sizes too big, layered and mismatched, held together with visible patches and tears. His hair hung in wet, matted clumps around his face, and his shoes, if you could still call them that, were held together with duct tape. Water dripped from him onto the checkered floor, forming a small puddle. The cafe went quiet. The kind of uncomfortable quiet where everyone pretends not to stare while definitely staring. Lisa had seen this happen before. Mr. Peterson had very clear rules about this sort of thing, rules he'd spelled out in his stern voice during her first week. No loitering, no panhandling, no service to anyone who couldn't pay. The cafe was barely hanging on financially, he'd explained, and they couldn't afford charity cases, but the man didn't seem to notice the stares or the silence. He moved slowly to the counter, his movements careful and deliberate, and sat down on one of the red vinyl stools. Up close, Lisa could see his face more clearly. Despite the layers of grime and the scraggly beard, there was something about his eyes. They were clear and focused, not clouded like some of the folks she'd encountered on the streets. He looked tired, desperately tired, but there was a quiet dignity in the way he held himself. "Coffee, please," he said softly. His voice was hoarse but polite. "And maybe a sandwich if that's not too much trouble. Whatever's easiest." Lisa glanced toward the kitchen where she could see Mr. Peterson's shadow moving. She should tell the man to leave. That was the rule. That was what she was supposed to do. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the gentleness in his voice or the way he'd said please, like those simple manners still mattered to him. Maybe it was because she knew what it felt like to be desperate, to be one bad break away from losing everything. "Sure thing," she heard herself say. "How do you take your coffee?" "Black is fine. Thank you." She poured the coffee and put in an order for a turkey sandwich. The man wrapped both hands around the warm mug, and she noticed his fingers were raw and cracked from the cold. He sipped slowly, savoring each small taste like it was the most precious thing in the world. It probably was, Lisa thought. When you had nothing, everything became precious. The other customers had returned to their own business, though Mrs. Chen kept shooting disapproving glances from her booth. Lisa tried to ignore them as she brought out the sandwich. The man's eyes lit up when he saw it. "This looks wonderful," he said, and there was such genuine gratitude in his voice that Lisa felt a lump form in her throat. "Thank you so much." She nodded and moved away to give him privacy. 20 minutes passed. The man ate slowly, making the sandwich last, taking small bites and chewing carefully. He was almost finished when Mr. Peterson emerged from the back office, his eyes immediately landing on the stranger at the counter. Lisa watched her manager's expression shift from confusion to recognition to anger. "Lisa," Mr. Peterson's voice cut through the quiet cafe. "A word. Now." Her stomach dropped. She followed him to the small space between the kitchen and the office, knowing what was coming. "What is that man doing here?" Mr. Peterson hissed, keeping his voice low but sharp. You know my policy. He just wanted some coffee and food, Lisa said quietly. He's not causing any trouble. That's not the point. The point is paying customers. Don't want to sit next to someone who looks and smells like that. It's bad for business. I want him out of here. Now, Lisa opened her mouth to argue but couldn't find the words. Mr. Peterson was already walking toward the counter, and she hurried after him, her heart pounding. Sir, Mr. Peterson said, his voice cold and professional, I'm going to need you to settle your bill and move along. The man looked up, his expression resigned like he'd expected this all along. He reached into his pocket slowly, pulling out what looked like an old wallet held together with rubber bands. He opened it carefully, and Lisa could see it was empty except for a single business card and a few pennies. I apologize, the man said, his voice steady despite the obvious embarrassment. I thought I had enough. I was mistaken. I can leave the sandwich. I only had a few bites. You already drank the coffee, Mr. Peterson snapped. The bill is $12. Pay it or I'm calling the police. The cafe had gone silent again. Everyone was watching now, not even pretending otherwise. Lisa saw Mrs. Chen shaking her head. The teenage couple looked uncomfortable. Mr. Davis had his phone out, probably ready to record whatever happened next. The whole situation made her feel sick. I'll pay it, Lisa heard herself say. Both men turned to look at her. Mr. Peterson's face was red. What? I said I'll pay it. $12. I'll cover it. Lisa, don't be ridiculous. You can barely afford. I know what I can afford, she interrupted, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out the small wad of bills, her tips from the day. She counted out $12 and placed it on the counter. It was nearly everything she'd made. She'd have maybe $15 left to last until Friday. The homeless man stared at her, his eyes suddenly bright with moisture. You don't have to do this. I know, Lisa said simply. But I want to. Mr. Peterson snatched the money from the counter, muttering something under his breath about bleeding hearts and bad business decisions. He stormed back to his office, and the tension in the cafe slowly began to ease. The man stood up carefully, gathering his worn jacket around himself. He looked at Lisa with an intensity that made her take a step back. Kindness like yours is rare, he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. I won't forget this. Not ever. Before she could respond, he reached into his wallet and pulled out the business card she'd seen earlier. It was dirty and bent, the edges worn soft. He placed it on the counter between them. My name is Richard, he said. Thank you for treating me like a human being. Then he turned and walked out into the rain, the bell chiming softly behind him. Lisa picked up the card, but it was so smudged and dirty she couldn't make out what it said. She tucked it into her apron pocket without really thinking about it, and went back to work, trying not to calculate how she'd make $15 stretch until Friday. She had no idea that her entire life had just changed forever. Lisa barely slept that night. She kept thinking about the $15 in her wallet and how she'd make it work. Her mother needed her medicine by Thursday at the latest, and that was still 2 days away. Maybe she could pick up an extra shift somewhere. Maybe Mrs. Chen would need help with her garden again. Maybe. Her life had become a constant stream of maybes and what-ifs. When her alarm went off at 5 in the morning, she dragged herself out of bed and got ready in the dark. Her mother was still sleeping in the next room, her breathing raspy but steady. Lisa kissed her forehead gently before leaving, whispering a promise that everything would be okay. She wasn't sure who she was trying to convince. The bus ride to Rosie's Corner Cafe took 40 minutes, and Lisa spent every second of it staring out the window, watching the city wake up. Street cleaners, early morning joggers, delivery trucks unloading goods. The world kept moving forward whether you could keep up or not. She thought about the homeless man from yesterday. Richard, he'd said his name was. She wondered where he'd slept last night, if he'd found somewhere dry to escape the rain. The cafe looked different in the early morning light, quieter, almost peaceful. Lisa unlocked the door and started her opening routine, Coffee brewing, tables wiped down, chairs arranged just so. She'd done this hundreds of times, and her body moved on autopilot while her mind wandered elsewhere. She was refilling the sugar dispensers when she heard it, the sound of a car engine. Not just any car engine, but the kind of deep, smooth purr that came from something expensive. Really expensive. Lisa glanced up through the cafe windows and felt her hands freeze mid-pour. A black car was pulling up to the curb. Not the kind of car you saw in this neighborhood. This was the kind of car that belonged in magazine ads and movies about rich people. Long and sleek with chrome that caught the morning sun and windows so dark you couldn't see inside. The engine cut off and for a moment nothing happened. Lisa found herself holding her breath without knowing why. Then the back door opened. A man stepped out and Lisa's sugar dispenser slipped from her fingers, clattering onto the counter. She barely noticed, because the man getting out of that impossibly expensive car, wearing a suit that probably cost more than her entire year's rent, was Richard. The homeless man from yesterday. Except he wasn't homeless at all. His hair was neatly trimmed and styled. His beard was gone, revealing a strong jawline. The suit fit him perfectly, dark gray with subtle pinstripes, and his shoes were polished to a mirror shine. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment, adjusting his cufflinks, and Lisa realized her mouth was hanging open. She snapped it shut. This had to be a mistake. Maybe it was his twin brother. Maybe she was still asleep and dreaming. Maybe she'd slipped and hit her head on the counter and this was all a weird hallucination. But no. As the man walked toward the cafe door, she recognized those eyes. Clear and focused. The same eyes that had looked at her with such gratitude yesterday. The bell chimed as he entered. Lisa stood frozen behind the counter, her mind completely blank. Richard walked directly toward her, his footsteps confident and measured. Behind him, through the window, she could see a driver waiting by the car. This was real. This was actually happening. "Good morning, Lisa," Richard said, and even his voice sounded different. Stronger, more authoritative, but still kind. Lisa couldn't form a complete sentence. "You're not homeless." A small smile crossed his face. "No, I'm not." "May I sit?" She nodded dumbly and he took a seat at the counter, the same stool he'd sat on yesterday. The contrast was almost laughable. Yesterday he'd been dripping rainwater and wearing clothes held together with hope. Today he looked like he could buy the entire block without checking his bank account. "I owe you an explanation," Richard said, folding his hands on the counter. "And an apology for the deception. My name is Richard Thornton. Does that name mean anything to you?" Lisa shook her head, still trying to process what was happening. Richard pulled out his phone and showed her a news article. She leaned in to read it, her eyes widening with each word. Richard Thornton, real estate developer, owner of Thornton Properties and Development, one of the largest property holders in the city. The article showed a photo of him at some charity gala, shaking hands with the mayor. "You're rich," Lisa said stupidly. "Like really rich?" "I suppose that's one way to put it," Richard said, pocketing his phone. "I inherited my father's company 3 years ago. 68 properties across the city. Office buildings, apartment complexes, shopping centers, and about a dozen restaurants and cafes. Including this one." Lisa felt the room tilt slightly. "You own Rosie's Corner Cafe?" "I do. Along with 4 other restaurants in this area. My father built this empire from nothing, and when he died, it all came to me. But here's the thing, Lisa. I realized I had no idea what any of it really meant. I'd walk into board meetings and see spreadsheets and profit margins, but I didn't know the people. I didn't understand how these businesses actually ran day to day." He paused, and Lisa found herself leaning forward despite her confusion. There was something about the way he spoke, honest and direct, that made her want to hear more. "So a month ago, I made a decision," Richard continued. "I wanted to see these businesses the way they really were, not through reports and manager meetings, but from the ground level. I wanted to know which of my establishments treated people with dignity and which ones only cared about profit. So I disguised myself and started visiting each location. As a homeless person," Lisa said, the pieces finally clicking together. "Exactly. I went to all 12 food service properties I own. Coffee shops, diners, a pizza place, 2 family restaurants, and 5 cafes. I dressed like I had nothing, and I went in and ordered something small. Then I'd say I couldn't pay. Do you know what happened at the other 11 places?" Lisa shook her head. "They threw me out. Every single one. Some were crueler about it than others, but the result was the same. Managers calling me names, staff laughing. At one place, they actually did call the police. At another, the cook came out and threatened to, quote, kick my lazy butt to the curb. Nobody helped. Nobody showed even the smallest bit of compassion. Lisa thought about Mr. Peterson threatening to call the police yesterday, and she felt a chill run down her spine. This cafe was my last stop, Richard said, his voice softer now. I honestly didn't expect anything different. I was ready to go back to my office and make some hard decisions about the kind of people I had working for me. And then you paid for my meal. It was only $12, Lisa said weakly. It was $12 you didn't have. I saw your tips when you pulled them out. I saw how you counted every bill. You gave me nearly everything you'd earned, and for what? For a stranger who looked like he had nothing. Do you have any idea how rare that is? Lisa didn't know what to say. Her hands were shaking slightly, and she gripped the edge of the counter to steady herself. It seemed like the right thing to do. Exactly, Richard said, and there was such intensity in his voice that it made her look up and meet his eyes. The right thing. Not the profitable thing, not the safe thing. The right thing. You saw another human being in need and you helped without hesitation, even though it cost you something real. The front door of the cafe opened, and Mr. Peterson walked in, juggling his keys and a coffee from the chain place down the street. He always bought his coffee somewhere else, which Lisa had always found insulting. He looked up, saw Richard sitting at the counter in his expensive suit, and his expression shifted from confusion to something like concern. Can I help you, sir? Mr. Peterson asked, moving behind the counter and shooting Lisa a look that clearly said, why didn't you serve this important-looking customer? Richard turned slowly on his stool, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop about 10 degrees. Mr. Peterson, I don't think we've been formally introduced. I'm Richard Thornton. I own this building. And this cafe, and I'm afraid I have some bad news for you. Mr. Peterson went pale, actually pale, like all the blood had drained from his face at once. His coffee cup trembled in his hand. Mr. Thornton, I didn't know you were coming. If I'd known, I would have prepared. You would have what? Richard asked quietly. Treated people differently? Put on a show? That's exactly the problem, Mr. Peterson. You're fired. The words hung in the air like smoke. Lisa's jaw dropped. Mr. Peterson made a strangled sound. Fired? But I've been managing this cafe for 6 years. The numbers are good. Profit margins are. Profit isn't everything, Richard said, standing up from the stool. He was taller than Mr. Peterson, and suddenly the manager looked very small. Yesterday you threatened to have a hungry man arrested for not being able to pay for a sandwich. You made a spectacle of his poverty. You showed zero compassion, zero humanity. That's not the kind of person I want representing my business. But that's policy, Mr. Peterson sputtered. No free meals. No handouts. You can't run a business by giving things away. You're right about one thing, Richard said. You can't run my business that way anymore. Because you won't be running it at all. You have until the end of the week to clear out your office. You'll receive 2 weeks severance pay, which is more generous than you deserve. Mr. Peterson looked like he might be sick. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Finally, he turned and practically ran to the back office, leaving his coffee abandoned on the counter. The door slammed behind him. Lisa stood completely still, her mind reeling. Everything was happening too fast. She felt like she was watching a movie instead of living her actual life. Richard turned back to her, and his expression softened. I'm sorry you had to witness that, but now we come to why I'm really here. He took a breath. Lisa, I'd like to offer you a job. I have a job, she said automatically, then realized how stupid that sounded given what had just happened. I meant a different job. I need a new general manager for this cafe, someone who understands what really matters, someone who treats people like people. I think that person is you. Lisa's legs suddenly felt weak. She grabbed the counter again. Me, I'm just a waitress. I've never managed anything. I don't know how to do ordering or scheduling or, you know how to treat people with kindness and dignity. Richard interrupted gently. Everything else can be taught. The salary is $75,000 a year, plus health insurance and benefits. And that's just the beginning. $75,000. Lisa's knees actually buckled slightly. She made maybe $22,000 a year working 2 jobs on her feet 14 hours a day, never seeing her mother, never sleeping. never breathing. $75,000 was an impossible number. The kind of number that only existed in dreams. I can't, she whispered. Why not? Because things like this don't happen to people like me. Richard smiled, and for the first time since he'd walked in, he looked exactly like the man from yesterday. Tired, real, human. Things like this happen when someone decides to make them happen. I'm making them happen. The question is, will you let them? Lisa looked at him, at his kind eyes and his expensive suit, at the black car waiting outside and Mr. Peterson's abandoned coffee growing cold on the counter. She thought about her mother, about hospital bills and medicine and electricity payments. She thought about $15 stretched impossibly thin. She thought about saying yes to something she didn't deserve, and then she thought, maybe that was exactly why she should say yes. Okay, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Okay, yes. Richard's smile widened into something genuine and bright. Good. Now let me tell you about the rest of my offer. Because the manager position, that's just the start. Lisa sat down hard on the nearest stool, her legs finally giving out. Richard waited patiently, giving her a moment to process. Through the window, she could see the morning getting brighter, people starting to pass by on their way to work. Normal people having normal days. Meanwhile, her entire world had just been turned upside down. I need you to understand something first, Richard said, pulling out the stool next to her and sitting down. For someone wearing a suit that probably cost thousands of dollars, he seemed perfectly comfortable in the worn cafe. This isn't charity. I'm not offering you this position because I feel sorry for you. I'm offering it because you're exactly the kind of person I need. But I don't have any experience, Lisa said, her voice shaky. I've been a waitress for 3 years. Before that, I worked retail. I barely finished community college. I don't have a business degree or management training or anything like that. Good, Richard said simply. The last thing I need is another manager who thinks everything is about numbers on a spreadsheet. My father used to say that you can teach someone how to read a profit and loss statement, but you can't teach them how to care about people. Either they have it or they don't. You have it. Lisa twisted her hands in her lap, trying to make sense of everything. You said the manager job was just the start. What does that mean? Richard leaned back slightly, his expression becoming more serious. Here's the full picture. I don't just need a manager for this cafe. I need someone to oversee all 5 of my restaurant properties in this district. A regional manager, essentially. Someone who can make sure they're all operating with the same values, the same respect for customers and staff. That position pays $95,000 a year. Lisa felt dizzy. $95,000. She couldn't even imagine that much money. That was more than her mother had made as a school teacher before she got sick. That was the kind of salary that meant security, stability, a life where you didn't have to choose between medicine and electricity. I can't oversee 5 restaurants, she said, panic creeping into her voice. I wouldn't even know where to start. How to do inventory, manage staff, deal with suppliers. You'll learn, Richard interrupted gently. I'll make sure you have training. The best training available. I'll pair you with my operations director for the first 3 months. You'll shadow her, learn the systems, understand how everything works, and you won't be alone. Each location already has assistant managers who handle the day-to-day details. You'd be focusing on the bigger picture, the culture, making sure we're living up to the standards I want to set. He pulled out his phone and showed her something on the screen. It was an organizational chart. See? You'd have a whole support system. Accountants who handle the finances. HR people who deal with hiring and paperwork. Inventory specialist. Your job would be to make sure that when someone walks into any of our restaurants, they're treated the way you treated me yesterday. With respect, with kindness, with humanity. Lisa stared at the chart, trying to wrap her mind around it. All those people, all those positions, all of it somehow connected to her. It felt surreal, impossible. There's more, Richard said, and something in his tone made Lisa look up. His expression had softened, become almost gentle. I did some research on you last night. I hope you don't mind. I had my assistant look into your background. A flash of embarrassment heated Lisa's cheeks. Oh, your mother is Patricia Chen. She was a 3rd-grade teacher at Lincoln Elementary for 22 years. She was diagnosed with stage 3 cancer 8 months ago. You've been working 2 jobs to cover her medical expenses, but you're still behind on bills. The hospital has sent you to collections twice. You've maxed out 3 credit cards. Am I right so far? Lisa nodded, unable to speak. Hearing it all laid out like that made her life sound even more desperate than it felt. Lisa, as part of your compensation package, I want to cover all of your mother's medical expenses. Past, present, and future. Every hospital bill, every treatment, every medication. I'll have my lawyers contact the collections agencies today and settle those debts. And I want to move your mother to St. Catherine's Medical Center. They have one of the best cancer treatment programs in the state. The tears came before Lisa could stop them. They spilled down her cheeks in hot streams, and she covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. She tried to speak but could only make broken, gasping sounds. All the fear she'd been carrying for 8 months, all the sleepless nights and impossible math and desperate prayers, it all came pouring out at once. Richard didn't say anything. He just sat there quietly, letting her cry. After a moment, she felt him press something soft into her hand. A handkerchief. Actual cloth, not paper. She'd never even seen a real handkerchief before. She used it to wipe her face, trying to pull herself together. I'm sorry, she managed finally. I've been so scared. Every day I wake up terrified that I won't be able to afford her next treatment, that she'll get worse because I can't pay for the good medicine. I've been carrying this weight for so long, and I can't believe this is real. It's real, Richard said quietly. I promise you it's real. Your mother can see Dr. Morrison at St. Catherine's. He's the one who treated my father. If anyone can help your mother, it's him. Lisa looked up at him through blurry eyes. Why are you doing this? Why would you do all this for someone you don't even know? Richard was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with something Lisa couldn't quite identify. Sadness maybe, or regret, because nobody did it for my father. When he first started his business, before he made his fortune, he went through a rough patch. Really rough. He lost almost everything. He went to his business partners, people he'd known for years, people he'd helped when they were struggling. Every single one of them turned him away, told him they couldn't risk being associated with failure. He paused, staring at his hands. My father never forgot that. He built his empire back up through sheer determination, and he became successful beyond anything those partners ever achieved. But it hardened him. He became obsessed with profit, with winning, with proving everyone wrong. He forgot how to see people. By the time he got sick, he'd burned so many bridges that when he died, only 3 people came to his funeral. 3 people, Lisa, after a lifetime of building and achieving and acquiring. I'm sorry, Lisa said softly. The day before he died, he told me something. He said, Richard, I built an empire, but I lost myself along the way. Don't make my mistake. Money means nothing if you have no humanity left. I promised him I wouldn't. And then I spent 2 years sitting in board meetings, looking at profit margins, becoming exactly what he warned me not to become. Until I realized I had to change. I had to find out who these people were who worked for me, who ran my businesses, who represented my father's legacy. He looked at Lisa directly, his eyes intense. You gave away money you desperately needed to help a stranger. You risked your job to show compassion. That's the kind of person my father should have been. That's the kind of person I want to be. And that's the kind of person I want running my businesses. The back office door slammed open, making them both jump. Mr. Peterson stormed out, a cardboard box in his arms filled with his belongings. His face was red, his jaw clenched. He didn't even look at them as he headed for the door. This is a mistake, he spat over his shoulder. You're going to regret this. This cafe will fall apart without me. She doesn't know what she's doing. Then I guess we'll find out, Richard said calmly. Mr. Peterson left, the door slamming behind him hard enough to rattle the windows. An uncomfortable silence filled the cafe. Lisa felt a surge of panic. What if Mr. Peterson was right? What if she really didn't know what she was doing? What if she failed and let Richard down and lost this incredible opportunity? He might be right, you know, she said quietly. I might fail. You might, Richard agreed, and the honesty in his voice was oddly comforting. But I don't think you will. And even if you stumble, even if you make mistakes, I believe you'll figure it out, because you have something more important than experience. You have heart. The first early morning customer came through the door then, old Mrs. Chen from the neighborhood. She stopped short when she saw Richard in his expensive suit, her eyes widening. Then she spotted Lisa's tear-stained face and frowned with concern. Lisa, honey, are you all right? Is this man bothering you? Despite everything, Lisa laughed. It came out watery and broken, but it was a laugh. No, Mrs. Chen, everything's fine. Actually, everything's better than fine. This is Richard Thornton. He owns the cafe. And apparently I'm the new manager. Mrs. Chen's eyebrows shot up. Manager, you? Well, it's about time. That Peterson fellow was always a sour grape. You'll do much better, dear. Now, can I get my usual? Or is the world ending and we're all just standing around? Lisa stood up, wiping her eyes one more time. Coming right up, Mrs. Chen. On the house today. Special celebration. On the house. Mrs. Chen looked delighted. Maybe I'll get the blueberry pie too then. As Lisa moved behind the counter, muscle memory taking over, she felt something shift inside her. The fear was still there, but underneath it was something new. Hope. Real, solid hope. She poured Mrs. Chen's coffee and cut her a generous slice of pie. And for the first time in 8 months, she didn't calculate the cost in her head. She didn't worry about whether she'd have enough. She just served the food with a genuine smile. Richard stood up, adjusting his jacket. I need to head to the office. I'll have my assistant, Beverly, call you this afternoon to set up the paperwork and get everything started. She'll also arrange for your mother's transfer to St. Catherine's. Is this afternoon too soon? This afternoon is perfect, Lisa said, still feeling like she was floating. Good. Oh, and Lisa? Take the rest of the day off. Spend it with your mother. Tell her the good news. You've earned it. He headed for the door and Lisa called after him. Richard? Thank you. For everything. For giving me this chance. He turned back, silhouetted against the morning light streaming through the windows. No, Lisa, thank you. Thank you for reminding me what really matters. Then he was gone, climbing into his black car and disappearing into the city traffic. Lisa stood there for a moment, Mrs. Chen's cheerful chatter washing over her, the smell of coffee and pie filling the air. The same cafe she'd worked in for 3 years. But somehow everything had changed. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from her mother. Morning, sweetie. Don't forget my medicine appointment at 2. Love you. Lisa smiled and typed back. I won't forget. And Mom, we need to talk. I have some amazing news. The best news. Everything's going to be okay now. I promise. She hit send and tucked the phone away. Through the window, she could see the city waking up fully now. People rushing past on their way to wherever they needed to be. The world kept turning just like always. But for Lisa, everything was different. Everything was new. Everything was possible. And it had all started with $12 and a simple choice to be kind. Lisa's hands were shaking as she unlocked the door to their small apartment. She'd left the cafe early, just like Richard had suggested, and taken the bus across town in a daze. The whole ride she kept replaying the morning in her head, half convinced she'd wake up and find it was all a dream. But the business card in her pocket was real. The missed call from someone named Beverly was real. The text message confirming her mother's appointment at St. Catherine's Medical Center for tomorrow morning was very, very real. Mom? She called out, stepping inside. The apartment was tiny, just 2 bedrooms and a living room that doubled as a kitchen. The furniture was old, most of it picked up from thrift stores or left on curbs with free signs. But it was clean. Lisa made sure of that. It was one of the few things she could control. In here, honey. Her mother's voice came from the bedroom, weak but warm. Lisa found her mother propped up in bed, a book open on her lap. Patricia had always been a reader, even now when the treatment made it hard to focus. She looked thinner than she had a month ago, her cheeks hollow and her skin pale, but her eyes were still bright, still full of the same kindness that had made her such a beloved teacher. You're home early, Patricia said, closing her book. Everything okay? Lisa sat down on the edge of the bed and suddenly all the emotions she'd been holding back came flooding out again. She started crying, big gasping sobs that shook her whole body. Her mother reached out immediately, pulling her close despite her own weakness. What happened? Lisa, talk to me. Did something happen at work? Did someone hurt you? No, Lisa managed between sobs. No, Mom, something good happened. Something really, really good. She told her mother everything. About the homeless man from yesterday, about paying for his meal, about him showing up this morning in an expensive suit, about Mr. Peterson getting fired, about the job offer, the salary, the promise to cover all the medical bills. Patricia listened without interrupting, her eyes growing wider with each detail. When Lisa finished, her mother was quiet for a long moment. Then she started laughing. Not a small chuckle, but a full, genuine laugh that turned into a cough. Lisa grabbed the water glass from the nightstand and helped her mother drink. I'm sorry, Patricia wheezed, catching her breath. It's just, this is insane. This is absolutely insane. Things like this don't actually happen. That's what I said, Lisa exclaimed. But it is happening, Mom. Tomorrow morning we have an appointment at St. Catherine's with some doctor named Morrison. Richard said he's the best cancer specialist in the state, and we don't have to pay for any of it. Not a single dollar. Patricia's eyes filled with tears. She reached up and cupped Lisa's face in her hands. You paid for a stranger's meal. It was just $12. It was everything you had, her mother corrected gently. And you gave it away without thinking twice. Oh, my sweet girl. I raised you right after all. They held each other for a while, both crying, both laughing, both trying to process this impossible turn of events. Finally, Patricia pulled back and wiped her eyes. So what happens now? When do you start this new job? I don't know exactly. Richard's assistant is supposed to call me this afternoon to go over everything. I'm scared, Mom. What if I'm not good enough? What if I mess everything up? Then you'll figure it out and do better, Patricia said firmly with the same tone she'd used when Lisa was young and scared of starting school. You've been handling impossible situations for months now, working 2 jobs, taking care of me, managing bills that didn't add up. You think running a cafe is harder than what you've already been doing? It's 5 cafes, Lisa said. 5 restaurants. That's a lot of responsibility. And you'll have help. That's what he said, right? Training and support and people to guide you. Patricia squeezed her hand. Lisa, you've been drowning for so long, trying to keep both our heads above water. Now someone's throwing you a life raft. Don't be afraid to grab it. Lisa's phone rang, making them both jump. The caller ID showed an unknown number with a local area code. Lisa's heart started pounding as she answered. Hello? Hi, is this Lisa Chen? A woman's voice, professional but warm. Yes, this is she. Wonderful. This is Beverly Martinez, Mr. Thornton's executive assistant. He asked me to reach out to you today. Do you have a few minutes to talk? Yes, absolutely. Great. First of all, congratulations on your new position. Mr. Thornton speaks very highly of you. I've been with the company for 8 years, and I've never seen him this excited about bringing someone onto the team. Lisa felt her cheeks flush. Thank you. I'm still processing it all, honestly. I can imagine. Okay, let's go through some details. I've arranged for you to meet with Dr. Morrison tomorrow at 10 in the morning at St. Catherine's. He's cleared his schedule specifically for your mother. I'll text you the address and parking information. The appointment is fully covered, as are all future treatments and medications. You won't see a single bill. Lisa's throat tightened. Thank you. That means more than I can express. You're very welcome. Now regarding your position. Mr. Thornton would like you to take the rest of this week off to spend time with your mother and handle the medical appointments. Starting Monday, you'll begin a comprehensive training program. You'll be working directly with Helen Rodriguez, our Director of Operations. She oversees all our food service properties, and she's incredible. You'll shadow her for 12 weeks, learning everything from inventory management to staff scheduling to supplier negotiations. 12 weeks, Lisa said, relief flooding through her. She'd been terrified they'd expect her to jump in immediately. Yes, Mr. Thornton wants you to feel fully prepared and confident. During this training period, you'll receive your full salary of $95,000 annually. After the training period, you'll officially take over as Regional Manager of Food Services. Helen will still be available for consultation, but you'll be making the primary decisions for your district. $95,000. Hearing it out loud made it feel even more surreal. Lisa glanced at her mother, who was watching her with proud tears streaming down her face. Beverly continued. I'm also processing the settlement for your outstanding medical debts. Our legal team will contact the collection agencies directly. You don't need to do anything. Those debts will be cleared within 2 weeks. Additionally, we're setting you up with benefits including health insurance, dental, vision, a 401k with company matching, and 3 weeks paid vacation. Vacation? Lisa almost laughed. She hadn't taken a vacation in 3 years. Couldn't afford to take even a day off. Yes, vacation. Mr. Thornton is very serious about work-life balance. He doesn't want burned-out managers. He wants healthy, happy people who can bring their best selves to work. They talked for another 20 minutes, Beverly patiently answering every question Lisa could think of. She'd need to fill out some paperwork, undergo a background check, which was standard procedure, and attend an orientation session next Friday. Beverly would email everything she needed to know. When Lisa finally hung up, she sat staring at her phone in disbelief. Her mother was grinning at her. Well, it's real, Mom, it's all real. Tomorrow we see the specialist. Monday I start training. In 2 weeks all our debts will be gone. I have health insurance. Actual health insurance with dental and vision. Do you know how long it's been since I've been to a dentist? 4 years, Patricia said. You keep putting it off because we can't afford it. Not anymore, Lisa said, and saying the words out loud felt like magic. We can afford it now. We can afford everything. That evening, Lisa made dinner for the first time in weeks without calculating the cost of every ingredient. She made her mother's favorite chicken soup from scratch with fresh vegetables. While it simmered on the stove, she sat at their tiny kitchen table and looked around the shabby apartment with new eyes. They could move. They could afford a better place, somewhere with more light and space. Somewhere without the leaky faucet in the bathroom or the window that didn't close all the way. But looking at their worn furniture and faded curtains, Lisa felt a wave of affection. This apartment had sheltered them through the hardest time of their lives. It deserved some gratitude. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Hi Lisa, this is Richard. Beverly tells me everything is arranged. I wanted you to know that Dr. Morrison is expecting you tomorrow. He's good people. Your mother is in excellent hands. Get some rest tonight. You've earned it. Lisa typed back, thank you. For everything. I still can't quite believe this is happening. His response came quickly. Believe it. You changed my life yesterday. I'm just returning the favor. See you Monday at the main office for orientation. The next morning, Lisa and her mother took a cab to St. Catherine's Medical Center. It was in the nice part of town, the kind of place with fountains in the lobby and art on the walls. Lisa had always imagined places like this were only for rich people who belonged in a different world than hers. But the receptionist greeted them warmly and checked them in without any awkward questions about payment or insurance. Dr. Morrison was a man in his 60s with kind eyes and gentle hands. He spent over an hour examining Patricia, reviewing her medical history, asking detailed questions about her symptoms and treatment. He didn't rush. He didn't make them feel like they were taking up too much time. He treated Patricia like she mattered, like her life was worth saving. I'm going to be honest with you, Dr. Morrison said finally, sitting down across from them in his office. The treatment you've been receiving isn't wrong, but it's not optimal. It's what we give patients when insurance won't cover the better options, but you don't have those restrictions anymore. I'd like to try a newer treatment protocol. It's more aggressive, but the success rates are significantly higher. How much higher? Patricia asked, her voice barely a whisper. Your current treatment has about a 35% 5-year survival rate at your stage. The new protocol has a 68% rate. It's not a guarantee, but it's much better odds. Patricia started crying. Lisa grabbed her hand and held tight. 68%. More than half. A real chance. When can we start? Lisa asked. I'd like to admit her this afternoon, run some additional tests, and begin the first treatment cycle tomorrow. The process will take several weeks. She'll need to stay here during the initial phase. Lisa nodded, trying to ignore the panic rising in her chest. Her mother would be in the hospital for weeks. Alone. Can I visit every day? You can visit any time, Dr. Morrison said kindly. We have accommodations for family members. There's a room with a bed where you can stay overnight if you want. You don't have to leave her side. That broke something in Lisa. All the fear and stress and impossible choices of the past 8 months came crashing down. She'd been so afraid of losing her mother, so terrified that she'd wake up one day and the woman who raised her would be gone. But now there was hope. Real, tangible hope. That afternoon, they admitted Patricia to a private room with a window overlooking a garden. Lisa helped her mother settle in, unpacking the small bag they'd brought. A nurse came by to explain the treatment schedule and answer questions. Everything was calm, professional, and reassuring. As the sun set outside the window, Patricia squeezed Lisa's hand. You did this, she said softly. You saved my life by being kind to a stranger. I just bought him a sandwich, Mom. No, baby. You saw someone suffering and you helped them, even though it cost you something real. That's not just kindness. That's love. That's humanity. And somehow the universe decided to pay you back. Patricia smiled. Or maybe it's simpler than that. Maybe good things really do happen to good people. Sometimes. Lisa stayed that night in the family room, sleeping in a real bed for the first time in a medical facility that didn't feel sterile and frightening. And for the first time in 8 months, she slept peacefully, Without nightmares about bills or loss or impossible choices, her mother was going to be okay. They were both going to be okay. Everything was going to be okay. 6 months had passed since that rainy Tuesday that changed everything. Lisa stood in front of the mirror in her new apartment, adjusting the collar of her blazer. The apartment was bright and spacious with big windows that let in the morning sun. Her mother's room was just down the hall, decorated with plants and photos and all the things that made it feel like home. Patricia had finished her treatment 3 weeks ago, and the latest scans showed no signs of cancer. 68% odds had worked in their favor. Lisa grabbed her bag and headed out, stopping briefly to check on her mother. Patricia was in the kitchen making breakfast, humming to herself. She'd gained back the weight she'd lost and her color had returned. She looked like herself again. Actually, she looked better than herself. She looked happy. Big day today? Patricia asked, pouring coffee into a travel mug for Lisa. Every day is a big day, Lisa said, accepting the coffee with a kiss on her mother's cheek. But yes, today is special. We're opening the community program at all 5 locations. I'm so proud of you, honey. Look at everything you've accomplished. Lisa smiled, but inside she still felt that familiar flutter of disbelief. 6 months ago, she'd been drowning in debt and desperation. Now she managed 5 restaurants, supervised 32 employees, and was implementing programs she'd only dreamed about. The training with Helen had been intense but invaluable. Helen was a tough teacher but fair, and she'd taught Lisa everything from reading profit margins to handling difficult personnel situations. The first location Lisa visited was Rosie's Corner Cafe, the place where it all began. She'd kept the name despite Richard's offer to rebrand. Some things deserved to stay the same, but everything else had changed. She walked through the door and immediately felt the difference. The cafe was busy with the morning rush, but there was a warmth to it now that hadn't existed before. The new assistant manager, Tommy, greeted her with a wave from behind the counter. He was a former line cook who'd been working double shifts at 3 different restaurants before Lisa promoted him. He'd been terrified at first, convinced he'd mess everything up. Now he ran the place like he'd been born to do it. "Morning, boss," Tommy called out. "Coffee?" "Already got one, thanks." "How's everything looking?" "Good, really good. We had someone come in this morning who couldn't pay. Young kid, maybe 19. I gave him breakfast on the house and told him about the job board." Lisa felt a surge of satisfaction. That was exactly what she'd hoped would happen. One of her first acts as regional manager had been to implement a policy at all 5 locations. Anyone who came in hungry would be fed, no questions asked. Anyone who needed help would be pointed toward resources. Job listings, housing assistance, food banks, counseling services. The restaurants had become more than just places to eat. They'd become community hubs. "Did he take any information?" Lisa asked. "Grabbed everything. Said he'd been sleeping in his car for 2 weeks after his mom kicked him out. I gave him the number for that youth shelter you partnered with." "Perfect. That's exactly right, Tommy." She made her rounds through the cafe, checking in with staff, observing how customers were treated, making mental notes. Everything was running smoothly. The profit margins were actually up compared to last year, which had surprised some people at corporate. Apparently, they'd assumed that giving away free food would hurt the bottom line, but the opposite had happened. Word had spread about what these restaurants were doing, and people wanted to support them. The cafes had become neighborhood favorites. Lisa's phone buzzed with a text from Richard. "Meeting at 2 p.m., my office. Bring your quarterly reports." She typed back a quick confirmation and headed to her next location. The day passed in a blur of meetings, check-ins, and problem-solving. A supplier had delivered the wrong